Molten gold dripped from Valen's lips. Into his scorched throat, the liquid fire poured. No screams escaped the ruin of his mouth. 1 hour ago, this man ruled the 14th spire. Now, his tongue was a puddle of glowing waste. 3 feet away, Jack stood. Blue energy flickered in his eye sockets. Watching the overseer dissolve into the obsidian floor, Jax did not move. 6 hours earlier, within the extraction pit, the reactor roared. From the black pipes, steam hissed and scalded the air. Through the haze, Jax gripped the logic threads. Across his palms, high voltage scorched the skin to charcoal. Deep in the marrow, radiation gnawed at his bones, pulled into the lungs. Ground glass dust shredded his breath. Inside this furnace, the 14th spire inhaled the souls of dead worlds. On the flickering monitors, error codes raced at light speed. Into the system, Jax forced a jagged logic loop. Against his nervous system, the feedback hammered like a pulse of lead. From his ears, dark blood leaked into the grime. Leaning his weight against the console, Jax spat. Through his fingers, 10 years of refined ether blood flowed. Beside the controls sat a heap of rusted industrial scrap. Glanting beneath the metal, a human tooth remained. This was the previous purifier. Into nameless scrap, the system had processed the man. In the calculations of the spire, workers were just temporary batteries. From the high ceiling, the throne slammed down. Metal bit into the obsidian floor, crushing the air below the platform. The weight fell. Valen sat on the seat, gold glinting against the blood on the floor. Adjusting his diamond-studded collar, Valen sneered. In his lap, the machine hound of glass growled. The animal smelled the stench of scorched meat. Watching the bubbles in his starlight wine, Valen swirled the crystal glass. Captured sunfire pulsed inside the liquid. Every drop represented 12,000 credits of stolen life. Every gulp swallowed the oxygen of 1,000 slum children. 0.5%. Valen barked, vibrating in his throat. The translation chip buzzed. Below the baseline, the efficiency dropped. Peasant. In 4 hours, the high judiciary gala begins. The purest ether toast must be ready for my father. Sluggish flow creates a deficit in our family ledger. The failure of a common tool will not be tolerated. Jax did not look at the noble, remaining on the threads. His hands stayed steady, choking on Sector 9 residue. The reactor grunted, a dry rattle of bone dust. His voice broke the heat. The breach is coming. To the containment field. The power must flow now, or the radiation liquefies every living soul in this sector. The cooling pipes are melting into slag. With a lazy flick of the wrist, Valen touched the map, the energy to the safety barrier. He cut, vanishing. The blue shield died. Against Jax's chest, raw heat smashed, exploding on his skin. Blisters rose and popped. To one knee, Jax fell. But in his grip, the thread stayed firm. Releasing the logic meant the entire mountain would vanish. Look at the hound. Valen laughed, flooding the animal's collar. Stolen energy blazed. Radiance burned in the dog's fur. In our ledger, a peasant's lungs carry no value. For the gala, my pet needs this light. Our beauty requires the fuel of your suffering. Smell the wine before the end. Rat. Valen drank the violet liquid. Stolen summers flavored the wine. Above his head, red debt lines began to pulse. The theft of every watt. The system recorded. The imbalance of the universe. The logic core tracked. Valen reached for the Human Utility Act on his screen. With a thumbprint, he reclassified Jax as raw material. No longer a citizen, no longer human, just a spark of electricity to be spent. Sliding from Valen's hand, the full auto mandate fell. On the digital scroll, the law glowed. Manual labor is finished, Valen declared. At 400% capacity, the system runs now. No more safety checks to slow the family profit. No more human errors from tired rats. Against the glass, Valen pressed his biometric seal. Wild and hungry, The reactor growled, breaking free from the suppressors. The machine roared. Toward the breaking point, the pressure climbed, screaming in the iron pipes. The ninth nebula woke up. Out of my pit, Valen barked. Null and void. Your contract stands. Revoked. Your identity vanishes. Inside the radiation, you will die before the guards find you. The air vents for this floor are now closed. Your breath belongs to my father's party. Slowly, Jack stood up. From his arms, scorched strips of skin hung like rags, the logic threads. He finally let go. Violet angry. The blue light shifted. He did not beg. He did not cry. The system is yours, Jack said. The output you deserve, you will now take. Toward the airlock, Jax marched. Behind him, the machine began to howl. Watching the numbers rise, Balin smiled. Waking up, the debt collector began the audit. Through the central gut of the spire, the steel cage plummeted against the rusted guide rails. Metal screamed in high-pitched friction, down into the lightless abyss. Gravity dragged Jax's shattered frame. Inside the cabin, oxygen levels stalled at the 5% mark. With every inhalation, his chest fought a physical battle against the thinning air. Slamming open with a heavy thud, the doors hit the bottom. Into the lift car, gray industrial mud poured. Welcome to the graveyard of the living. Out of the elevator, Jax crawled, blocking the narrow exit. A filter enforcer stood. Armored plating stripped from dead miners covered the guard's chest. From his heavy utility belt, an electric baton hummed with lethal voltage. Hand over your eye units, the guard barked. Quantitative hardware belongs to the masters. Swinging the heavy weapon, the guard aimed for Jax's skull. By a fraction of an inch, Jax dodged the strike, hitting a rusted steam pipe. The baton sent sparks into the muck. I have no credits for you, Jax rasped. A dry rattle of bone dust and carbon. His voice broke the silence. Laughing, the guard gripped Jax's throat with a metal-reinforced glove. Your organs will fetch a high price in the scrap market, the guard sneered. The House of Valen requires more party fuel for the night. On the blacklist today, your lungs are worth 50 credits. The metal fingers squeezed, crushing Jack's windpipe. Reaching out with a trembling hand, Jax touched the enforcer's chest plate. Beneath the stolen armor, his scorched fingers found a loose logic wire. I am a primary purifier, Jax whispered. Every glitch in your illegal suit is known to me. Triggering a liability overflow, Jax bypassed the core safety. Snapping shut, the suit's hydraulic locks hissed. Metal plates folded inward, crushing the guard's ribs into splinters. Screaming, the enforcer watched as his own armor ate his flesh. Jax pulled his hand back as the crunching finished. Into the filth, the guard collapsed. A pile of broken bone matter and short circuits remained. Deeper into the slums, Jax marched. He passed a row of rusted shipping crates used as homes. Inside, a family shared a single, leaking oxygen mask. Blue-tinted skin covered the children's faces from the cold. Causal dust clouded their eyes, blinding them to the world. For his wine, Valen had stolen their life credits. In his marrow, Jax felt the heat of the reactor. The debt grew too heavy for the Empire's ledger to carry. Pulling on Jax's scorched robe, a small girl looked up. Is the spire coming to take our breath? She asked. The sirens are making my ears bleed. The ground shook beneath her bare, blackened feet. The auditor is coming for the thieves, Jax promised. For one more minute, hold your breath. The air will be free soon. High above the causal clouds, the music began. Stolen light beams filled the high judiciary gala hall. On a balcony of pure glass, Valen's father stood, down at the dark world below. The old man stared. The poor are merely the coal for our fire, the patriarch said. On his finger, he adjusted a ring made of compressed time. Every minute stored in that gold cost a worker's lifespan. Efficiency is the only god we worship, he whispered. Through the crowd of laughing, silk-clad nobles, Valen walked. In his hand, he carried the bottle of violet starlight wine. 1,000 breaths formed the price of every drop. For the judiciary proxy, he poured a glass. Taste the future of our sector, Valen bragged. No more manual labor to slow the yield. No more safety check delays for the workers. Into our family vaults. Pure power flows tonight. Our profit is infinite. Drinking the wine, the proxy smiled. The liquid stained his teeth purple. Your yield is impressive, overseer, the proxy said. But the floor is growing quite warm. Should a breach concern us? Lapping away the doubt, Valen laughed and waved his hand. Minor fluctuations. He lied to the high-ranking guest. Self-healing. The automated system requires no human touch. The full auto mandate carries my own biometric signature. On my shoulders, the legal risk rests entirely. Why worry about a machine incapable of failure? Trust the code and drink the wine. In the heart of the slums, Jax found the terminal. A mountain of junk metal and dead wires hid the processor. Plugging his eye units into the core logic, he linked his mind. The Spire's nervous system flooded his consciousness. Red warnings, buried by Valen, flashed in his vision. A hungry monster. The ninth nebula glitch gnawed at the frame. The primary cooling pipes had already dissolved. A sun trying to explode. The reactor throbbed. To the gala fountains. Valen had rerouted the emergency water. In the cooling fluid, the nobles danced. The poison of the core filled their wine glasses. Jax began the hunt. Searching for the contract, he bypassed the firewalls. The digital ghost of Valen's signature appeared. Under Imperial Law Section 9, every leak formed a debt. Every worker's death became a criminal charge against the signer. Bleeding data into the network, Jax bypassed the encryption. He opened the liability folders for the entire galaxy to see. To the breach, he connected Valen's biometric ID, shaking the entire spire. A massive groan erupted, a mountain breaking in half. The sound echoed, swaying. The crystal chandeliers at the gala began to fall. From the air vents, violet steam hissed. The proxy dropped his glass, shattering it on the marble. "What is that smell?" the proxy asked. Sudden fear filled his voice. Into acid. The starlight wine transformed, stammering. Valen watched his face turn the color of ash. On his holographic ledger, the fake numbers turned red. Payment, the system demanded, hitting 1 million units per second. The debt climbed. 10 million. 100 million. In 10 seconds, the House of Valen hit bankruptcy. Triggered. The auditor woke up, turning black. The sky above the tower vanished. A shadow miles wide blocked the imperial sun. In the clouds, the mechanical hourglass appeared. To collect the soul of a thief, the auditor arrived. The time for games had ended. Turning in the fractured sky, the mechanical hourglass ground its iron gears. Against the glass ballroom floor, black sand struck with the mass of stolen years. Every grain represented a life debt, reclaimed by the universe, increasing tenfold in an instant. Gravity pinned the nobles to the marble, tearing under the sudden pressure. Their expensive silk robes shredded into rags around his withered fingers. Valen's father felt the metal constrict, turning into base lead. The rings of compressed time lost their divine shine. With a heavy thud, the jewelry hit the floor, useless and gray. Grabbing the old man by his neck, the security droids offered no salute, stripping the gold from the weeping guests. The machines followed the new logic core. "The House of Valen is a total deficit," the lead droid barked. Its voice shattered every remaining crystal chandelier in the hall. Every family asset is now property of the Imperial audit. First payment in the ledger. The biological matter of the signatories. Looking at his father, Valen's younger brother began to scream. "Spare me. I was not part of the trade," the boy begged. Watching the auditor's shadow, the patriarch did not hesitate. To the droid, the old man handed his own son. "Take him," the father hissed through his cracked teeth. "His youth is worth 10,000 ether units. Clear my personal debt with his marrow." The machine did not pause for emotion. Into the processing vent, the droids threw the screaming air. Bones snapped under the hydraulic press. refined into pure biofuel. The boy's life vanished into the spire's furnace. The ledger flashed red. Insufficient payment. The machine boomed. The patriarch collapsed into the mud of his own making. Scanning the entire sector, the auditor's beam cut through the clouds. Against the dark sky, runes of purple fire burned. Crime. Murder of 12,000 refiners. Crime. Theft of 3 million megawatts. Crime. Fraud of the first degree. Total debt. 1 trillion units. Inside the extraction pit, Valen fell into the rising purple slime. Reaching white heat, the golden translation chip melted through his lower jaw, hissing on the obsidian tiles. Molten gold dripped from his chin. No screams escaped his fused throat. Acting as a digital parasite, the chip ate his childhood memories to stay powered. The face of his mother vanished from his mind. His own name dissolved into static. He became a nameless vessel for a dying world. Liquid fire filled his lungs. Igniting in the center of the pit, a pillar of blue light exploded. In the center of the flames, Jack stood, recognized by the system for a decade of perfect compliance. He wore the silver robes of the witness. In his hand, the auditor placed the sword of absolute law. No longer a peasant, he spoke with the vibration of the machine itself. "You have nothing left, Valen," Jack said, moving the heavy metal walls. His voice shook the foundations. "The auditor emptied your secret vaults in 5 seconds. To the pockets of the workers, every gold coin returned. In the gray mud, your father is a beggar. In the deep scrap mines, your sisters are moving iron. The name Valen is a dead word. The archives erased your entire history." Reaching for the escape hatch, Valen's bone fingers slipped. The metal burned at 500 degrees, flooding the room. The violet waste of the reactor rose. This was the chemical result of his own greed. Touching his legs, the liquid turned flesh to white bone instantly. Pulling on his soul, the extraction process began. Into white static. His eyes turned. "I followed the rules." Valen wheezed through the melting gold. "Efficiency was my only command. The Empire received its energy for the gala. I am a hero of the sector economy." "The Empire does not reward thieves," Jax replied. Walking through the fire, he approached the dying man. Jax looked at Valen's shriveled, blackened lungs. The deletion of logs meant nothing. Safety log, 99. Bravo lives in my own retinas. The auditor saw every murder you signed. For a bottle of wine, you traded 10,000 lives. Now for a single spark of ether, the machine trades you. Your soul is the new fuel for the spire. In the observation deck, the junior overseers fought for the escape pods, pushing each other into the walls. They screamed for mercy. Refusing to open the locks, the computer remained silent. "Access denied," the system voice stated. "Your fingerprints are part of the fraud. You are all accessories to the debt." Turning their weapons on the staff, the droids began the harvest. The men who mocked Jax were now raw material, dismantling their bodies. The machines followed the efficiency code. They turned into valves and iron gears. Their arrogance was processed into cooling pipes. The spire was eating its own masters to stay alive. Dripping onto his chest, Valen's tongue smoked. Rising from the scorched silk, black fumes filled the air. Reading his brain with brutal speed, the system extracted every hidden bank code. Every secret property was found. In 60 seconds, his existence would cease. No record would show he was ever born. A nameless battery in a dark wall, he faded. His spirit broke into 1 billion digital bits. "Wait, I have the master sector keys," Valen begged. Reaching out with a hand of bare bone, he shook. "I can make you the king of the spire. I can give you the world. Just stop the pain." "I am already the master," Jax whispered, gripping Valen's melting face. He leaned in. "The auditor has chosen a new architect. The person must have clean hands. The person must know the heart of the engine. That person is definitely not you." Watching the final light leave Valen's eyes, Jax stepped back. "This is the efficiency you wanted," he said. "No more human errors to slow down the yield. Just pure energy. and absolute debt. Are you satisfied with the result? Trying to curse the world. Valen opened his mouth. Only black ash poured out, turning a violent shade of deep purple. The auditor's beam finished the cycle. The debtor was gone, swallowing the last of Valen. The beam vanished. His body turned into a cloud of industrial waste. Hitting the floor, a single blackened chip remained. This was the remains of the golden lie. Turning the massive hourglass, the auditor signaled the end. The black sand stopped. Debt paid in full. The machine boomed. Silence fell over the spire. Across the imperial capital, the black shadow of the hourglass stretched, a cold blade cutting through the golden horizon. Flickering and dying, the energy grid inside the Supreme Council halls signaled the expiration of the old law. Miles of gold-plated cables turned to dull lead in seconds, their conductivity erased by the auditor's hand. Panic gripped the grand judges as their high-backed marble seats vibrated with the tower's groan. From their pedestals, they stared at dead holographic displays that once calculated their infinite wealth, sputtering into silence. Their life support machines stopped pumping the stolen ether blood, fading with the dying light. Their artificial immortality dissolved, leaving only wrinkled skin and brittle bone. In the center of the darkened hall, the High Lord roared into the void. Thin and weak, his voice carried no authority without the amplification of the grid. Paralyzed by the sudden absence of the hum, the guards stood in the shadows, their power armor locking into place as the batteries died. Across every public monitor in the city, static hissed and screamed, vanishing from the screens. The faces of the noble families left a void, filling the palace displays with a cold, indigo radiance. Jax's blue eyes appeared. Within the deep pit of the reactor core, he sat, a ghost made of iron and logic. "I am the primary architect," Jax announced, his voice rattling the windows of every luxury villa in the sector. Through the speakers of the palace, the sound moved with the force of an avalanche. The House of Valen is a scorched memory in the imperial ledger. In the pit, their debt was paid with the marrow of their heirs. Now the auditor scans your genetic vaults for the systemic deficit you created. Against the arms of his leaden throne, the High Lord gripped his trembling hands. "We have an empire to run, peasant." He hissed toward the screen, his lungs burning from the lack of filtered oxygen. "Send the ether now, or the fleet arrives at your gates to strip the spire. The law protects our right to this energy, and you are nothing but a tool for its extraction." In the center of the pit, Jax did not move a muscle. Between his fingers, a glowing violet thread of reality hummed, vibrating at the frequency of the universe. "The law changed 1 hour ago," Jax replied, the sound echoing through the capital's central square. "Under the full auto mandate you signed, debt follows the flow of power. You drank the wine Valen bought with the blood of 10,000 refiners. In the auditor's log, every sip is a recorded crime against the collective. Toward your marble towers, the debt curse moves through the wires now. Choose to sign the new labor code, or watch your palace dissolve into industrial waste." With terror in their eyes, the council members looked at the fractured sky. Above their marble roofs, the mechanical hourglass sat, its gears grinding out the final seconds. Heavy sand grains prepared to crush their genetic codes into nameless dust. In this cold moment, they were not gods or judges. They were targets of the absolute law they had weaponized against the poor. From the High Lord's lips, a single, broken command fell. "Sign the document," he whispered, his pride turning into a pile of useless ash. The golden age of the thieves was finished. The great redistributing. Within the 14th spire, a massive physical reorganization began. To the droids, Jax gave the command to open every air vent and purge the noble sectors. Into the lower slums, pure indigo energy flowed through the pipes, driving out the smog, evaporating instantly. The gray fog of the city left behind a sky of deep violet. From their rusted shipping crates, millions of workers looked up into the clearing air. Oxygen filled their scarred and burning lungs, cooling the internal fires of the causal dust. In seconds, blue-tinted skin turned to healthy pink, as the blood oxygenated. Across the mud, broken tablets and personal units glowed with the return of stolen credits. 20,000 points, 50,000 points, 100,000 units. With interest, every cent the House of Valen stole returned to the pockets of the refiners. In the muck, the little girl who had begged for air laughed as her family's account turned gold, tasting of mountain rain and absolute freedom. The air moved through the alleys. Through the monitors, Jax watched the people breathe, their survival no longer a market commodity. In the high tower, the spire changed its physical shape to match the new law. Luxury silk and gold plating melted and fell away into the furnace below. From the frame, raw steel and functional logic revealed the true, brutal structure. Into a cold command center, the observation deck transformed, its velvet cushions replaced by iron benches. No more fountains sprayed cooling fluid for noble parties. No more galas served the sons of thieves while the world choked. In the pipes, the ninth nebula achieved a stable frequency, its ancient anger quieted by the balance of the grid. Down to the lowest cooling rooms, droids marched the junior overseers. They were not executed or processed into fuel. Instead, their soft, manicured hands were forced to touch the hot logic threads. They learned the physical weight of every megawatt they had previously wasted. They learned the legal cost of a single human breath in the extraction pit. To fail meant the debt would eat them too, as it had eaten their masters. In the new order, mercy did not exist, only the relentless math of the universe. They worked until their arrogance burned away in the heat of the core. The frozen throne of the architect. From the reactor floor, Jack stood up, his charred skin flaking away to reveal a new metallic sheen. Toward the cold steel throne, he walked, his footsteps echoing like a hammer on an anvil. He did not wear the silk robes of a king or the gold of an overseer. He wore the scorched rags of a purifier, a reminder of the pit. In the clouds, the auditor bowed its giant mechanical head. To the sky, the mechanical sun returned, casting a steady light over the reclaimed city. The audit of the 14th spire was finished. Beside the control console, Jax picked up the last bottle of Starlight wine. Against his palm, the crystal glass felt cold, a relic of a dead era. To the edge of the observation balcony, he walked, looking out over the Empire. From their dying screens, the High Lords watched him with trembling lips. From the clean streets below, the workers watched him with silent gratitude. With a steady hand, Jax tipped the bottle, pouring the violet liquid into the dark abyss. "This is for the men you turned into scrap," Jax said, his voice carrying to the ends of the sector. Against the rocks far below, the wine hit and vanished into the shadows. Valen's ghost was gone, erased from the archives and the soil. Into the throne of the spire, Jax sat, his weight settling into the steel. Against the armrest, his burnt fingers tapped a rhythmic code, locking the system. Under his rule, the 7th sector began to breathe with a steady pulse. Through the grid, he saw the threads of 1,000 worlds, all vibrating with potential. In the neighboring towers, corruption still glowed like a rot in the darkness. The work of the architect was just beginning, and the Empire stood before him like a broken machine. Only Jax knew the code to fix it. He was the primary purifier of reality. A long, melodic note escaped the spire, vibrating through the bones of the city. It was the sound of a heart beating, steady and strong. Finally, the building was alive and free from the parasitic elite. Into the flow of the power, Jax closed his eyes, feeling the movement of every electron. The man who controls the energy controls the future of the species. In balance, the universe finally rested, the debt settled in full. For the people, he increased the flow, opening the reservoirs of light. The era of the worker arrived, written in indigo fire. To the man who built it, the spire belonged.
Watching Valen trade his own brother's life for a few units of ether only to end up as industrial waste himself, that is the kind of poetic justice that actually feels earned. If you were in Jax's shoes, would you have shared every single credit with the slums, or would you have kept a little survival bonus for your own trouble? Just between us, I initially thought about letting Valen live in a cage, but the cold logic of that full auto mandate was just too hungry to leave any survivors.